Okay. So we're going to kick off today. It's another Let's Talk session that we have, and we've got an amazing speaker with us today. I'm quite excited to speak to Erik. Yeah. So without any delays, let's jump over to Erik. Erik, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and yeah, give us some predictions for what you think is going to happen post-COVID.
Yeah. Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, so I'm an Aussie and living in the UK. I've been here for the last 8 or 9 years, and I'm working with a company called Lybra. Lybra's providing revenue management technology, and I'm Chief Commercial Officer. So Lybra is owned by a company called Zucchetti, who is not as well known outside of Italy as they are inside of Italy. But they're a very large company in the sense that they provide technology into lots of different sectors. To give you a sense of the scale, they've got about 6,000 employees, like I said, across many, many different sectors. In the hospitality division, Zucchetti Hospitality has about 35,000 hotel customers, meaning they're using one of the PMSs that they own, or a CRS or a booking engine. They've got like 5 different PMS companies, 5 or 6 different booking engine companies, 2 RMSs. So we're one of the RMSs, the Lybra Assistant RMS. And then we have another RMS company, which is really popular in the German-speaking market of Europe, which is called Rateboard. So yeah, we're part of this. We're a small team, but part of a much larger organization. But fortunately, they let us operate the way we've always operated. We definitely benefit from shared resources, and we benefit from, let's say, the investment in product development. But we still move and think just like a startup. So yeah, like I said to you before, I'm an Aussie living in the UK. But originally, when I left high school, I went straight from high school to hotel school, and then while I was at hotel school, to help pay my way through college, I started working in hotels. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was just really lucky in retrospect that the first hotel I started working at was a Hilton hotel. And back then I did not know a Hilton from anything else other than that's the brand on the roof. But it was only after that I joined other hotels that I realized, wow, okay, all of that training, all of those policies and procedures, the way we did things, that was really good training, because now, you know, things aren't the same and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, so after working in hotels, I've been working in hotel technology for a long, long time. But I guess that just means I'm a one-trick pony, as the expression goes. But hopefully, if you're a hotelier, then we can have a nice old chat, because that's the technology side of hotels is all I know. But so I do enjoy speaking about it. And unfortunately, we're in a situation right now which we can't sort of brush off or push aside the way we may have looked at the bird flu or mad cow disease or an airline pilot strike, all of these different blips or bumps that we've had in the past, I think pale into insignificance when you compare them to what we're living right now for the last year with this coronavirus. And I'm sort of Captain Obvious right now, pointing out the you know what we're all living. But I think in each of these situations that we find ourselves in, I always try and look at the opportunities and look positively, not just for the sake of being blindly optimistic, but being pragmatic. And then hopefully that's something we can talk about today, because I don't want this to be a doom and gloom session. However, we can definitely learn from each other. based on experiences in different parts of the world, because this is one thing that we can't ignore, is that this virus, if it started in Wuhan, China, let's say it did, well, it pretty much spread everywhere. And so whilst I think some countries, the UK in particular, were ignoring this early on,
Yeah.
it didn't matter whether your government or businesses ignored it or not. It didn't matter, because it pretty much swept everyone in its path, right? So, but yeah, I think there are definitely opportunities for sure.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's quite interesting that you're saying that you sort of like went into the hotel industry, ended up with Hilton, not quite understanding where you're actually finding yourselves in. I started my hotel career as well by actually fleeing the house. And I heard back in when I started my career, I'm probably giving my age away now, is some hotels were giving accommodation. So that's how I got into hospitality, just purely by default.
Oh, wow.
But it's amazing where we both find ourselves now these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's I mean, the decision that I made to actually go to hotel school, like to hotel college, was such a chance situation. Like, a friend of mine from high school had gone to the UK for 1 year to work in restaurants, and then she came back. And when she came back, she was telling me that she was going to this information evening for this particular new college, hotel school. I was talking to her about this acting course that I saw, and we should go and do the acting course. And she's like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do that. But come along with Megan and I for this night, this information afternoon. And so, yeah, I went along, and it was amazing. They were saying things like, are you the kind of person that likes people? Do you like different cultures? Blah, blah, blah. And everything they were saying about, are you this kind of person? I'm nodding, and I'm thinking, I thought we were just here before going to this acting information thing. But then I was like, all three of us, by the way, Lisa, Megan, and myself, we all joined the college. But I was sort of just tagging along. But I said to them, you know what? I don't know if you guys are going to do this or not, but I'm doing it. This sounds really cool. And so, yeah, if it wasn't for my friend Lisa mentioning this information afternoon, I really wouldn't have thought of hospitality. But I'm glad I did.
Well, so are we. We're very glad you did. Erik, so let's talk a little bit about revenue management. So obviously I consult with quite a few hotels. I get to speak to a lot of owners, directors, general managers, and elephant in the room, but the question I get asked, well, is revenue management relevant in this time? What are your opinions on that? I get a little bit uptight, but that's just because I'm too close to it.
Yeah, and you know, that question, I think, has always been there, and that question gets, I guess, thrown up or mentioned now, let's say, during a prolonged downturn in demand more than ever. And I think that every hotel, you will know this from having worked with many different properties, a hotel, let's say, might have a scale of revenue management culture. And that scale might be absolutely zero, like nothing, no culture whatsoever, to, you know, quite high, where everything they do, they live and breathe from a revenue perspective. And so I think if we agree that a lot of hotels are closer towards the 0 than the 10, then I think that we obviously need to accept that kind of perception. But the opportunity now for revenue management, I guess, to prove itself or to prove its value is there still, just in a different way. So I think for a lot of hotels, they think about revenue management right now as extreme cost control. We need to chop as much as we can. If we're not closing the property, then let's just really reduce costs as much as possible, and that's all they do. That's their RM strategy, right? But then if we look further along that spectrum of hotels with more revenue management culture, then I think a lot of properties, if they don't already work closely together in terms of the RM person or let's say the role and marketing, if they are two separate people or they're two separate teams, then this kind of a situation forces them to work more closely together, or it may be one person. So obviously in some operations we have one person that does everything, does marketing, pricing, distribution and revenue in let's say a sub 80 room property, or you've got multi-100 room properties where you've got 2 or 3 people covering those roles. So whether it's one person or multiple people, I think this scenario has worked. This pandemic has forced them all to work more closely together, particularly on the topic of demand generation. If we all agree, or we've all, let's say, witnessed that demand has been absolutely flat and low for a long time, the natural question that an owner will ask, or the natural question the GM might ask, is when will business come back? And they can look at the news, or you can point to the news to say, well, there's now a South African variant of the virus, so that's not good. And UK are like, yeah, we've got a UK variant, that's not good. Anyway, we are all bombarded with news. Unfortunately, it tends to be more negative than positive, but it's a very real question for an owner. So are we expecting things to be back to normal by summer, the European, let's say June, July, Northern Hemisphere summer, or Christmas, or how long is a piece of string? So I think hoteliers have been given this question, and it's a valid question. Now, whether they have this RM culture or not, let's say, forget about your belief, or let's say your culture. What's your answer to that question? And that question forces a lot of hoteliers to come to terms with, well, actually, I don't really have an understanding of where my demand could come from or what my market segmentation is. And for each different market segment, what the demand profile is. So for example, my domestic leisure segment, people who let's say living in my country or living within 2 hours drive of my hotel, that segment has got a lot more demand potential than international corporate, for example. And again, I'm stating the obvious, but for a lot of hoteliers, that they might just look at all guest business and all demand in the same way. So I think that for a hotel to think that we don't need revenue management today, they might be thinking about just the cost of technology rather than, forget technology, what are you going to do in terms of demand generation or being prepared for, let's say, being prepared for this pandemic continuing, the rebound not happening as fast as you want or expect. So in other words, what I'm saying is hoteliers should absolutely prepare for the worst. Hopefully that doesn't come to fruition, but it really is irrelevant whether they think RM is important or not. If they've got bills to pay, if they've got fixed costs, variable costs, those costs can either be carried by the owner or they need to be serviced by the cash flow from the hotel business. So ultimately, whether the hotel ignores the importance of revenue management or not. They kind of have to address how to maintain or improve their business in any way they can.
Sort of forces them to think a little differently. It's probably, we were thinking that way before, you know, in where does the business come from? It's all part of our analytics in revenue management, you know, but our focus were very much, well, okay, well, what are we going to close on? Are we going to meet the budget? Are we going to exceed last year's figures? So it's the same process, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's now thinking on smaller scale. So where's the next piece of business going to come from? And it's studying and understanding the current behavior, seeing the domestic leisure customer coming in, when are they coming in, you know, and then trying to predict and put a little bit of a spin to that. So I also get, apart from revenue management, get asked, when I talk about forecasting being quite critical at the moment, you know, I get laughed at. People's like, no, we don't need to forecast. I mean, what can we forecast? We don't know what the demand is going to be. What do you think of that forecast comment?
Yeah, the forecast comment is another one of those comments that falls into the category of whereabouts are you on the scale of having a revenue management culture? Because for many hotels, it's a no-brainer that a lot of your business is based around the forecast of your business. Now, okay, so you're forecasting 15% for the next 6 months. Okay, cool. Okay, but at least we can agree that a forecast is a starting point. I think where there's a lot of validity to the relevance of a forecast, it comes from the way forecasts used to be prepared. So whether you had a spreadsheet or whether you were using an RMS, the spreadsheet and also the RMS were based on a forecast that had different layers of data. And the first layer was your historical actual bookings. So what were your bookings for the last 12 months? Christmas was up, Christmas was down, etc., etc. And then what you saw historically was your pickup, and then you know, add your pickup to your base of history, and that helped provide some kind of a estimate. However, we all know very clearly that the last 12 months or your recent history for 1 year is completely irrelevant, at least for the near term, in terms of producing a forecast. So now that's valid, but all that means is that you just need different data sources for your forecast. And that's available today in terms of feeding in pricing information from your competitors, feeding in your market demand. So what is Cape Town versus Joburg versus other destinations overall, and other data like flight search demand. So for some hotels who are not located anywhere near a gateway airport or international airport, flight search demand is not so relevant. But if you are a hotel that has international visitors sometimes, or that used to be part of your market segmentation, then flight search data is one of the best sources of an early indication of not just when people are looking for, but also what length of stay, what lead time, and which nationalities. So we've got different types of different countries are in different situations or positions in terms of their ability to travel. And that's something that you need to be aware of. And just listening to the news or just going to the different government websites around the world, it isn't practical, because there's a lot of information out there in terms of this country's list of, red list of countries that you can't go to, or if you do go to, then you're going to come back and you have to spend $2,000 in quarantine hotels. So there are so many, let's say, moving parts out there that technology tools like an RMS, for example, rather than you dismissing it like I don't care because the forecast is gloomy. Yeah, but what about the data that's talking to you about when the demand will come back? And there might be some data in there. I'll use New Zealand, for example, because New Zealand and Australia have done pretty well in terms of how they've coped with the number of deaths, etc., etc. Almost no cases. Imagine you see data that says the New Zealand market, they're all looking for holidays in your destination. You might say, well, we've never really had that many Kiwis over here. Yeah, but the data is now showing forward, and I'm just using a left field example, but when you start seeing the data for different markets who are now ready to travel and spend, and it involves your destination, you can then start preparing and being ready for that, as opposed to missing the opportunity altogether.
Yes. And I agree with you. And that should be the focus, I think, of revenue management at the moment. What people should be focusing is understanding those different behaviors. I mean, I had an amazing example with a client that predominantly were doing normally pre-COVID high volumes of business over weekends and hardly anything during the week. And when we were analyzing it, and then the new behavior shows a flatter line, you know, showing some business coming through in midweek and weekends as well, but not quite full. And we were trying to analyze and understand this, like, where's this midweek business coming through? And obviously a direct impact of people's behavior that's changing now, because we can work from home or we can work remotely. So we actually can now go on holiday or work somewhere else during the week. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but for us, our schools are intermittent. So for instance, my son's school only goes to school every second week. So you have a whole week that you are not restricted to staying at home. And many people were going out to the small outskirts in the countryside, you know, and staying in a hotel, and the kids have a good time. And so you should be focusing on those kind of change in behavior, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when we think about the rebound or the recovery, we cannot think about when will things be back the way they were, like in 2019 and beyond, because I think a lot of people were thinking that initially, like, when will business rebound? Because in a lot of markets, 2019 was pretty good. Like 2019 was actually very, very strong business for a lot of markets. But yeah, what you've just said now is so true, in that because people have now experienced working from home for the first time in a lot of cases. For me, I was working from home 3 years before this all hit. So for me, it was just business as usual for me. But I was making lunch for the kids, and actually I had everyone else around, which was quite nice. I really enjoyed it. But I know there are so many companies out there. I think we all know the kind of company. They're suspicious. They don't trust their employees. If you're working from home, you're going to be watching TV. And out of, the miserable kind of companies who won't give their employees the tools or the opportunity. Well, guess what? They were forced, and I'm exaggerating, obviously, but a lot of businesses found out that actually we're operating just fine. And in fact, in a lot of cases, we're a lot more efficient, a lot more productive, blah, blah, blah. People's well-being, people's mental health. A lot of cases, when you take someone's 1 hour commute either each way, when you take that away from people, that's a positive thing in many cases. Not every case. Some people like to be away from the family, I'm sure, right? But okay, so yeah, that's a new market segment, Teresa. Not just, I said domestic leisure earlier, but what about domestic corporate, who may want to, like you said, work from different locations, but not necessarily their own home, but almost like a working holiday, because outside of your working hours, let's say 9 to 5, whatever, then you can experience that environment you're in. And I think that's definitely going to be a new sector for sure. But unfortunately, I also believe, and I hope I'm wrong, that the international corporate business, group business is, I honestly don't believe it'll come back to the way it was at all. So now, to what extent, I don't know. But like I said a bit earlier, I think if you're a hotel that has a lot of, you're a corporate oriented hotel, and you have a mix of not just domestic corporate, but international corporate, really start thinking hard about, well, what if that doesn't come back? Like, what does only 50% of that business look like for us if that's the new situation? Again, I'm not just saying this to be a doomsday merchant, but that's my feeling. I spoke with a US hotel audience last week, and we had one property. They said, we're based in Southern California. We are predominantly groups and conventions. We are, that's our market. And they were not happy because the government had told them that no groups and large conventions were allowed. And they said, the question was, what large group business can we replace this with? And I said, I'm sorry, but there's a reason for this restriction. There's a pandemic, there's a virus going around, right? So don't try and get around, or please don't ask how you can replace this with this. But what I said was, think about, repurposing or reimagining how you can get other business between now and when things do come back a little bit more. 2-hour radius of driving from your hotel. Use your time to find out who's there, what businesses or what organizations and schools, universities, whatever, are in that catchment area, and think about the individuals and what you can do for that. But it blew me away a little bit that they somehow hadn't cottoned on to the fact that they wanted to replace that missing business with other group business, and I could not understand how they were missing what I thought was obvious. But anyway, so I just think that that yes, so the way business will come back or rebound will definitely be very different to what we've experienced, but that can be good as well, depending how we react or how we plan for that.
Yeah, I very much have a similar feeling than you have about the corporate business not going to recover as we used to. I used to it. And I actually had a very similar conversation with some of my Cape Town clients, because Cape Town is highly seasonal from a leisure perspective, and in the low demand period are dependent on corporate travel, are dependent on group travel. And I was having the similar conversation saying, well, have you thought of what you're going to have to do to replace this business? Yeah, we'll have to see where that lands, but I do agree with you. Another topic that I quite struggle with, is very interesting conversation, is around pricing. So earlier in the conversation, you were talking about being the owner and directors of companies, chasing cash flow, if you needs to either come out of the hotel or the owner's pocket, if it doesn't get covered by cash flow. So pricing is very geared to cover cash flow as opposed to being very strategic.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the long-term impact of that's going to be?
Yeah, different hotels will have different positions. So ultimately, for a lot of hotels, no, I won't say a lot, for some hotels, this pandemic has been the perfect opportunity for a refurbishment to upgrade facilities. It's like this is perfect, because if we were shutting down one part of the property to upgrade, we would be missing out on a lot of business. But now, with business being greatly reduced, they've used this time to invest. Okay, now that's not every hotel, but for some hotels, well, some owners, that they've got obviously a different financial position in terms of their hotel asset. Now, if a hotel is not in that situation, then the GM or the operating team needs to really have a clear understanding of their fixed costs, variable costs, and what is their break-even point. Because without knowing that, then everything else is a bit of a guesstimate. But if we're talking about a hotel that, let's say, will not survive another 12 months with the current demand levels, then the hotel needs to think, the owner needs to think about the long-term position of the asset. We've seen customers of ours, for example, who 3 or 4 months ago, I keep saying 3 or 4 months ago, but when I really look at it, it's like 9 months ago. Like the last 12 months have just
blur.
Yeah, we've had one customer who, a hotel, who actually have decided to reposition the hotel as long-term apartments. So they're doing 6, 12 month, because they don't see the hotel demand returning for at least 12 to 18 months. So that's a decision they made. So some people will think, okay, remember, we're thinking about worst case scenarios. What do we do if things continue like they are for another 12 months? Now, even though we may strongly believe that things will improve slightly, think about the worst case scenario. Can you survive another 12 months? Can you survive another 18 months? And then whether you reposition or repurpose the asset to be apartments or something else is your decision. But if you are not in a position to be able to change the kind of asset from a hotel to residential apartments, then, like I said before, once you understand what your really your break-even point is, then in terms of your pricing, I think you need to use that break-even point. Once you understand all of your variable costs, which obviously you want to reduce, as being your let's say your bottom line. So if you are looking at pricing based on historical, let's say, trends, then you've got more room, probably, when you can go down to, let's say, a lower price level, but without, for example, an acceptance that this is how your pricing will be. Make it conditional. Make it only a family and friends rate. Make it a condition of this postcode or this region if you're within 2 hours. Like put some loose restrictions on it where you're not tied into that pricing long term. So I'm not talking about slashing prices for the sake of it, but I'm talking about getting enough cash flow to survive, but doing it in a way that's pragmatic and will mean the business survives, rather than, holding on to higher prices because I saw a webinar once that said never get in a price war. No, well, we're talking about a pandemic situation now, and every hotel situation will be different. Yeah. So if you're a property that does have the ability to, let's say, ride out this current storm, don't drop your pricing, because that drop in price will not generate more demand. That drop in price, the idea is to at least generate some cash flow. So I would say in those situations, keep your pricing at a level that's, let's say, commensurate with your market, without slashing it dramatically, like I was saying before. So each property will be slightly different, but it'll be one of those 3 or 4 situations that applies to everyone.
Yes, so definitely. So I see a lot of long-term rates being discussed at the moment, and especially the tour operator sector, sort of trying to push zero increases or reductions in rate long-term. And I'm like, oh, I'm so cautious against these things. I mean, rather, like you say, do something short-term, but have a restriction around it, something that is not sort of influencing. I mean, of course, yes, this is a perfect opportunity to reset your rates, long term, if you have a good just business case for that. But don't commit to like ridiculously low rates because we're now wanting to sign business because we have nothing on the books. It's probably the most riskiest thing that you can do.
Yeah, I think there are opportunists in these situations. So some travel companies might think, right, now is a perfect time to get what we want from these hotels, fixed rates, contracted rates, and hotels, hopefully, after many, many years of many different types of suppliers talking about moving away from static rates to more dynamic rates, have at least that experience to be able to, have a more productive conversation with those travel companies, and ideally use data to show where fixed or static prices may make sense or where they absolutely don't make sense. And that's always been, I think, the weakness for some hoteliers, not all, in that they don't have the data. They don't have the information to either support their argument or to make their negotiation stronger. Even a simple thing like, what was the production from your company over the last 3 years? Yeah, a lot of PMSs have that as a standard, as a given, and a lot of people might be thinking that that's easy. Our PMS has that. Not every PMS. So I'm talking about some basic things that are sometimes missing. But yeah, at the same time, if there are travel companies that are prepared to commit to volume, then that's worth looking at. But you need to let the data either support that strategy or not support it. Without data, there's that expression, everyone's has an opinion, but without the data, it's just an opinion,
Yes. No, for sure. We definitely need the data. So just talking a little bit about the data. So, so everybody that knows me knows that I absolutely love technology and I think things need to run smoothly. So I still believe that automation is king. I mean, there is no ways that we can manually process every kind of decision. Are you in agreement that automation is something that hotels should consider?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of my favorite topics, or my favorite questions in a way, because I think I'm very old school in this regard. I wish I wasn't old school. I wish it was common and accepted and celebrated that in the hotel business, no matter what kind of property you work at, that what we're actually delivering is something called the art of hospitality. And anyone who's heard me speak before will probably be rolling their eyeballs right now. Here goes Erik again, talking about the art of hospitality. Now, so automation, I'm talking about hospitality and the art of hospitality because not having everything streamlined, not having systems integrated and automated is often one of the main reasons why staff cannot always deliver great hospitality. How many times has anybody here gone to check in at a hotel and maybe there's no one in front of you at the desk, right? There's no line, there's no queue. But the person behind the desk has got their eyes down at the computer, click, 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 click. They've got a card here. They're sort of frowning and looking at the card and click, click, click. And you're there as the guest. No line, right? No queue. And then, okay, then you might, okay, I'm exaggerating, but it happens, believe me. And then you get attended to, and you have a card, like a registration card, flung across the desk at you, and then the person is now, usually with a mouse, they're frowning. They were frowning at the card. Now the frowning is at their screen, and they're sort of looking at their mouse as they move it up and down. And you're thinking, are they playing Tetris? Because whatever system they're using must be so complicated. Now, I think I'm overly harsh on reception check-in. I used to pride myself, smooth, efficient check-in. All of the click, click, click stuff, I would do that after the guests had left. I'd make sure I gave them the information they needed. Breakfast is here, la, 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 la. No, I wouldn't be, anyway. So, Teresa, sorry about that. I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but
it's brilliant.
Honestly, automation really frustrates me because, you know, the only time no automation is acceptable is if the hotel is number one on TripAdvisor within their city. If they're consistently number one and they consistently deliver amazing guest service everywhere, front desk, restaurant, etc. Okay, then they have a pass. Then they're excused. But guess what? They probably have automation. They probably are able to deliver that service because everything is smooth. They have a service culture. I spoke a little bit before about an RM culture. A service culture is another thing that unfortunately is not there in a lot of hotel properties. So, so look, I think the fact that a lack of automation can, number one, increase your costs. That should be something that rings alarm bells with owners. You're paying more. You've got higher costs because this system doesn't talk to this system, so that all the data needs to be entered. Like the fact that you have higher costs, the fact that it impacts or can impact on guest service are two hugely important factors. You know, you're particularly now with this pandemic, you want to control costs as much as possible.
Yeah.
If your guests are delighted and happy, they're more likely to leave a review, or not even leave a review, but just tell other people how delighted and happy they were. But it shouldn't be an exception. It shouldn't be, oh, gee, that guest was happy. Why isn't every guest that happy? You know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, I really strongly believe that automation can help, but not by itself. If you don't have a service culture, it doesn't matter if everything is super automated, then you're not going to have, I think, as successful a business with that service layer that's missing.
Yes. And it's so important, you know, and especially in this day, you know, where service is probably the one thing that separates you from everything else. If you don't deliver a good service, I mean, you're a lost cause, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love the way you describe reception.
You can tell that I've actually lived that experience, right?
Clearly.
I'll tell you a quick little story. It is a short story. So one of the properties that I was working at was a luxurious resort in the Whitsundays, and I was training front desk staff, check in, check out, etc. And we were using this system. I'm not sure if you've even heard of it, called Maxeal. And Maxeal, it used to be a system that was used by lots of Hyatt hotels around the world. And it was an old black screen, green text, an old Unix system. Okay. And this is all before internet. This is all before PCs, right? Anyway, the system was okay. Like it did what you needed it to do. But when you were checking out a guest, it was one of these systems that asked you a question, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Every time you answered it, another question came in, yes, no. In other words, if the guest was coming to the desk and you just wanted to present them their bill to review before, confirming any minibar charges, etc., we knew that if you just went yes, 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 yes 5 times, no, and then enter, enter, enter 5 times, we knew that was the sequence you needed to do just to print a folio. So guess what? We were there smiling, good morning, and we're going click, 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 bang, 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 click, click, click. We're not staring at the keyboard, we're not staring at the screen. And it was just like this really efficient, smooth process. Guests would look like, wow, these guys are really able to drive through their keyboards, but they didn't know that all we were doing was counting 5 times.
Yeah.
Keys. But this was just because that's the tool we were using, and we wanted to have, well, a rapport with the guest, eye contact with the guest, and not that, head buried in the computer scenario. So yeah, when I check in at hotels and that happens, I'm okay now, but because I used to train people in that area, I'm a bit like, if I was behind the counter right now, I'd be like, look at the guest, like eye contact. Anyway, it's a great industry.
My pet hate is going out for lunch and nobody can notice that my glass is empty. I mean, they would make a fortune out of me if they keep topping up my glass.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally
reading people and understanding the guest experience.
Exactly.
Erik, another question for you. So do you see a shift in behavior coming our way with regards to the type of accommodation people would be choosing post-COVID?
Yeah, I do. I think the way I used to describe guests currently to a lot of hoteliers is that imagine, I mean, we all know the term germaphobe or a cleanliness freak or a clean freak. Like, there are people who genuinely have a fear of germs, germaphobes. There are also people who, on a scale, are not dysfunctional, but they might be somebody who puts hand sanitizers after shaking someone's hand, and there are people that just don't care. Now, what I used to say was, imagine that every single guest that's staying in your hotel right now is a germaphobe. Like, you may not be a germaphobe. Try and imagine what that's like and set up everything so that they don't have to touch a pen that 8 other people have touched and signed their name and maybe sneezed upon. Anyway, so you can obviously look at, I mean, the guest may not want to touch that pen, but the guests are all carrying their own phone, and they'd be quite happy to use their own phone to check themselves in and check themselves out, and maybe open the door of their room, etc., etc. So I think that's how hoteliers should be thinking now anyway. But if we step back and look at, let's say, the traveling public who have been locked up for a year and now are desperate to travel, either by themselves or with their family or whatever the situation might be, they might look at a hotel a bit differently, or a bit more, let's say, skeptically than how they used to. Like, for example, and I'm really talking about, like, say, like bigger properties that have this problem rather than smaller ones. But you imagine like a big casino hotel in the US, or similar kind of property. Does a guest want to go and check in where there's a crowded lobby full of people, or even worse, going up in a lift or an elevator, whatever word you use, full of people, or breakfast buffet in the morning, elbow to elbow with people coughing, snorting, sneezing? I'm sounding like a germaphobe. I'm absolutely not. Like, I'm absolutely not. But can you imagine now that things that a lot of people would just let slide Now be like, ooh, okay. I think a lot of people have been a lot more aware of how easily that expression, coughs and sneezes spread diseases, that expression, a lot of people have that at top of mind. So they might think about a vacation rental.
Yeah.
They might think about an Airbnb kind of property. What I mean by Airbnb is you have the whole place to yourself. There's no crowded lobby. There's no sneezing and coughing breakfast buffet. There's no crowded lift. So I think, yeah, I think a lot of people who wouldn't think twice about a hotel stay may consider alternate accommodation, unless they can be given the reassurance or the confidence that actually with the hotel, we don't have crowded lobbies. It's a la carte menu. There's no buffet for breakfast, etc., etc. Now, and that's something for hoteliers to consider, how they may address that situation. Like physically, do they have capacity and space to do a la carte service if they didn't do buffet? So obviously these things have evolved, just you know, those hotel factories to squeeze people through, and you know, 100% people checking in and checking out. Like we all know those kind of hotels, but for the hotels that are, you know, don't have any lifts or elevators, great situation. If they're able to offer socially distanced food service, even better. But it comes down to deciding how you will operate, then absolutely communicating that to the guest without putting the fear of God into them, without having, I mean, someone was talking recently about don't let the guests check in and think they're coming into a sterile hospital where everyone's got masks, visors, gloves. Now, I actually think that there's no problem with everyone following those recommendations. But if you have that, brand it. Why don't you have hotel branded masks? You can get nicely tailored masks, like reusable masks, with your hotel branding. Offer them to your guests, because if they're taking them with you, it's better than the pens they guests used to take that they forget about in terms of a souvenir. But yeah, I just think that we, as hoteliers, we need to be aware of the need to reassure guests of safety and security, like always, but now to a higher level in terms of the COVID and everything that goes with it. Because yeah, you can totally understand why a family might prefer their own villa versus a hotel room, even if the villa's more expensive, you know?
Yeah. I've definitely seen an increase in demand for self-catering units. I've got a couple of self-catering.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely been an increase for that.
Yeah.
So Erik, it's so nice talking to you. But you know, we've got this lovely thing called load shedding in South Africa, and I think my turn is next. In conclusion, last couple of wise words from you. What are you seeing that we need to be aware of relative to revenue management?
Okay, so this falls into the positive category. I feel like I've been a little bit doom and gloom here, but any hotelier or any hotel that is looking at the US guest, the US market, I think there are definitely safari lodges that are very popular with US guests.
For sure.
You should have a look, if you haven't seen it already, at a new program called TripAdvisor Plus. So it only came out this month. So if you're not aware, don't worry, it's pretty new. So TripAdvisor Plus is a program for TripAdvisor members who are mostly American. Obviously, there are non-Americans, but it's a very US-centric platform. They pay $99 a year. Not you, not the hotel. The hotelier pays nothing, zero. So these TripAdvisor members pay $99 a year, and then within TripAdvisor, they will see which hotels are part of this TripAdvisor Plus program. Now, you, the hotelier, control everything. You control what you're offering the guest. You have a choice of discount. You don't have to discount, but what they usually encourage you to do is include some kind of benefit or amenity. So a credit towards dinner, free breakfast, an upgrade to a room category subject to availability. If you're part of that, then I think that's something to consider, especially because the commission on those bookings is zero commission, which is great. And the other thing is that TripAdvisor will give you the guest contact details, not like the OTAs who hide that and keep it for themselves. So you will be able to communicate with the guests through their full journey. You also can turn this on and off when you may or may not need it. And then just related to that, just this week, the US airport traffic numbers are the highest since March 2020. So there are more and more people in the US being vaccinated, and those people who are vaccinated, they're traveling, they're going. So there's some positive things out there.
For sure. Oh, that's exciting. Oh. Erik, it was such a pleasure speaking to you as always.
Likewise.
Really, really appreciate your time. I think we're out of time right now before the powers of being cuts us off.
Okay. Really enjoyed my time as well. And everyone there who's been listening in, the communication channels are open. You can find me on LinkedIn and other places. So I look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll share your details so that people can reach out to you. That'd be fantastic.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have
a good day.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.